Family love expert, coach, advocate, and author Jane Wolfe Francis is a licensed psychotherapist, attorney, and founder of Parenting Our Parents and its unique POP family coaching program that helps families with aging seniors successfully navigate the many confusing, complex, practical, emotional, financial, and legal challenges. Let's give it up to Jane. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. And in conversation with Jane, born in Cedar Rapids, a graduate of Wellesley College, Kathy Eldon. Kathy has worked as a teacher, journalist, author, and film and television producer in England, Africa, and the US. Kathy launched Creative Visions, inspired by the life of her son, Dan Eldon, artist, activist, and photojournalist, killed at the age of 22 in 1993 while on assignment for Reuters in Somalia. The organization has impacted more than 100 million people. So thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. And I will go ahead and hand it over to them.
And by the way, there's food on that table. We've laid out a little platter. Please help yourselves. I think there's ways to
Hold off for about 10 minutes while we all read.
Speak more into the mic. Speak more into the mic. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Good. So, you might recall the first time you thought it might be time, or soon time, to consider parenting your parents. That's what we're going to explore here today. And I'm going to let you know when I first recognized it was my turn and begin with a reading. The plan is we're going to interact and find out about you all and how this can help you. But first, a little bit about what happened to me.
Can you send her the Bible?
How's this?
Better.
Great, thank you, Tom. When I came to town that life-changing December, it had only been a matter of months since I'd seen my parents last. Ever since I left home for college, my parents had always been so excited to see their only child that they would come and pick me up from whatever airport I flew into, rather than wait for a taxi to deliver me to their apartment. But this visit, in the freezing night air, no one was at the airport for me. Not only was there no warm welcome, but when I called them on the phone from the hotel where I soon would become a regular, Dad was curt, monosyllabic, and distant. That was so unlike him. Also sounding extraordinarily exhausted, he tried putting off getting together for dinner, and to the last possible moment, it seemed as if Dad wished I would cancel the evening altogether. When I finally met up with Lillian and Jack Wolfe at a cozy neighborhood restaurant that unnerving evening, I didn't recognize the old, worn-down couple in front of me. Having always known her to be a perfectionist, Mom's appearance was shocking. She looked like someone had pulled some old dress from the back of her closet and stuffed her into it. Mom's customary hairstyle, immaculately combed and carefully organized into a white-haired bun, appeared to have had a comb randomly, half-heartedly dragged through it. My hitherto elegant mom would never have let herself go out of the house looking like that. In other ways, too, she was a shadow of her former self. Mom's breathing was clearly labored as she dragged herself to our table at a global pace. When I kissed her cheek, she was icy from the inside just to the touch. My sense that she was inside all the way through, not really chilled by the cold temperatures. So that was when I met up with them.
Oh man, that really makes me sad. I actually yesterday
I went with our daughter to visit her mother-in-law's 91st birthday. And I must say, I just found it very disturbing because she was a little bit of a hollow shell of herself. And since her husband died, she's just shrunk in her psyche and her cognitive abilities and her size and every aspect. Anybody here have parents that you're concerned about at all? Any of you? Yeah. Yeah. Any of us aging parents? Yes, okay. One or two of us. Yeah. I know that we're very concerned about, I am very concerned about the title of your book. It's called Parenting Our Parents. And we were in college together and we were really good friends. And I just really don't like the title of this book. It sort of annoyed me because my parents were very, very conscious. I think my mother had to worry about her mother, her mother-in-law, and her great aunt. So she had been honestly parenting all those people for so long that she really didn't want us to have to parent them. And so when I saw the name of the book, I thought, I don't want to be parented, thank you very much. I'm going to be that other kind of person who doesn't need all that. So, you know, we've had a lot of arguments about it, but I get it now, even especially after yesterday. What do you think?
Well, for me, I felt as I began to watch what was happening with them and therefore what was happening with me, I felt angry. I didn't really want to see them aging. And what I discovered I needed to do was to rev up compassion and to feel what it must feel like to be them. And watching me watch them, and watching me see them the way they were, and kind of knowing that they needed something. And the danger that many people see, and maybe Kathy is describing, is that parenting our parents may sound like taking over your life. And it isn't that. Now, there may be a time when your parents are much older, perhaps suffering with Alzheimer's, can't dress or feed themselves, don't recognize you, that somebody, you or a professional person, will need to be there for them. But it doesn't start out that way. And I felt that in order to evoke the kinds of feelings of what good parenting was, that was kind of what I was stepping into. And I didn't know any other ways to put it. I thought it would be protective and joyous, and I had no interest in taking over their life. But I can see Kathy's point of view.
You weren't being touched.
Yeah. So any of you have aging parents that you're noticing anything about? Or you want to talk about here? Tell us.
What should we be noticing? Because I'm sort of like terribly sensitive because I'm starting to think about whatever you're going to say is maybe applying to me. So would you tell us what it looks like to
Sure.
be concerned?
Anybody here go to their parents' house for Christmas time? Okay. So you're in their home, and without looking like you're executing a search warrant, try opening the refrigerator door. See what's in there, what kind of food, how old is the food, how healthy is the food, who's preparing the meals for them, how's that happening? You might have been down the hall, and for some people they're going to be storing newspapers and all kinds of things in the hall, so you might not be able to walk comfortably down there. If you head in the bathroom, you might look at the prescriptions. See if you know what prescriptions they're taking and why, and how often, and what the expiration dates are. You might head into an office and find unpaid bills, perhaps insurance. So those are things, for example, that you can look at without being overly intrusive. Get some sense of how are they doing things without you on their own, or maybe they do have some help. My parents had a cleaning lady for decades until they got really old, and then of course they fired her. Other things one could look for are really on the person themselves. The way my mom was so dilapidatedly dressed and so unlike herself. There are people who are experienced who can tell you from the way people walk whether or not something is wrong. Did you see any of this?
I see nods, sad nods, yeah.
Or maybe other people you know, maybe other relatives, maybe friends of parents.
You know, when I was young, when I was very little, my parents had Dr. Spock, and they did all sorts of horrible things that Dr. Spock told them to do, which is why it turned out probably the way I did. I don't know. We're left to cry and all sorts of stuff. But then we had parenting our parents. No, excuse me. We had what was it called? What to expect when you're expecting.
Yes, that was the whole next generation behind us. I see people shaking their head.
Which made you have to rock the baby until it fell asleep or something completely different rules. But surely there's something out there, or there were things out there when you had a problem that we could have read. But so why did you take it upon yourself to do this book? It was a lot of work.
Yes, it is a lot of work, but I looked long and hard for anything that would help me, and I didn't see anything out there at all. There were no parenting magazines. That was before there were podcasts. Interestingly, we didn't either have FaceTime or Zoom or anything where we could see our parents. So when we talked to them long distance, we just had to take their word for how they sounded. But there was nothing out there that really addressed what I saw as the need for kind of a movement. And it led me to do what I did next, which I will read you about.
By the way, she's a psychotherapist, she's a lawyer, she's really smart, so I wouldn't have taken this. This is a lot to create a movement.
While working on this book, which actually was, I wrote it 3 times. I didn't want to put it out in the world. Patients, other people who didn't know me, people who wanted to know me, everybody would now have this information. And my parents were particularly of the generation of, don't talk, very quiet what goes on in the house. Maybe I see some head shaking. So, you know, I really didn't know if I could authentically, legitimately tell their story. But I did. I wrote it 3 times, and my editor, who happens to be sitting here, and is related to me, and was a professional editor, said, I think the book's pretty good. Maybe you'd like to put this one out, because if you want to write a 4th book, you could pay your next editor. I was incentivized to put that book in. So while working on this book, my concern for the fragmented and fragile social net under our nation's most susceptible demographic, our seniors, continued to grow. I began to see the expanded vision, far bigger than any single family's journey. I came to realize that those of us doing parenting our parents, which I call POP, and I created this language so we would have something to identify with. I called myself, maybe some of you doing this, POP parents, and I called it the POP cycle, where we care for those who cared for us. Some people call it popsicle. And I came to realize that those of us doing POP needed even more than a really good book. What we also required, it seemed, was a POP community, a movement that would provide momentum, energy, and involvement. The support of others could successfully equip us to fulfill the enormous responsibilities and accomplish the tasks of POP, of parenting our own parents. So I created a website and a community and a blog along with a book. So when you're next awake at 3 a.m. worrying about your parents and how you're going to best cope by going have other people to talk to. I don't think any of our government agencies are going to be there with us when we're worrying then. So why did I write the book and start the pop community? I did so because I wanted to support you and others like you to manifest your vision of pop love and loyalty. By being part of this new pop community, we're positively altering the face and character of our nation and how we treat our aging population. Should this book help you and your family relations, turning them into ones you've always wanted, you and I will have made a significant contribution to there being more joy in your life and the lives of your loved ones and your nation. A little while I can tell you a little more about that first event.
Yeah. Oh, please do. Yeah, I mean, yes, let's open it up.
Anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments?
As one who's actually already read the book and talked to you quite a bit about it, I do think there's an interesting component from what you've read so far, and that is that you arrived at an airport to see your parents. There's an added layer of complication by being somewhere separate from your parents when you see this. You know, it requires a lot of travel, not being right there with them, having periods of time between, long periods of time between when you see them and seeing the difference from one visit to another, but then the logistics involved with trying to help them from afar. Can you maybe speak to?
One of the things I do, in addition to having a practice, is I supervise groups of people whose parents have Alzheimer's. And support groups are really, really wonderful. Some people are in their 20s and 30s and they don't have peers, they don't have anybody to talk to. So they get on and they talk with other people. And one of the things I noticed is how different it is with siblings, those who live close and those who live at a distance. So there's all the logistics, as you're saying, Cooper, of getting to them, and should I go, and it's winter, and oh my God, and what else do I have to do, and family here, and but the people who are at a distance tend to be in denial, particularly with parents with Alzheimer's. But I think generally with aging, they really just kind of don't see it. And then when they're maybe invited to give some respite to the child that's there taking care of the parents, why don't you come for 2 or 3 days, and they leave. And then people get to see what it's like in the morning, and what it's like at sundown when it gets darker and the confusion sets in. And get a whole different sense of it. And having been an only child, I always sort of fantasized how great it would be to have a sibling and all of that. And in my case, I didn't have anybody specifically to criticize me, my parents. But if you can work it out and have siblings and get support, and I created a coaching program for families because I'm a real disliker of worrying. I issued the worry challenge out to people I work with. And the worry challenge is, when we worry, we end up thinking the things that we most don't want to happen over and over and over again without much resolution. So I call that self-destructive. And so my challenge is the first person who shows me the benefit of worrying, challenge is over. However, I wrote a whole book about planning, and that really is the difference. And that's why it's so important to be looking right at the beginning. You know, I see in the back my daughter-in-law and granddaughter, who maybe someday soon will be looking in my direction and checking the closets and the hallways and the refrigerator. But it's always so much better if you can just somehow begin to enter the conversation. And one of the things I like to say is, they're always our parents. And they're proud of us. And they're proud of our taking care of them and protecting them, as long as we don't get too pushy about how we're doing it, and we act appropriately.
Could you please do a checklist for those of us to plan so we don't actually have to be parented in a way? My mother and dad, as I say, were so well organized that at the age of 98 and 99, when my mother was 98, dad had died a few months before, she made the decision that it was time to go, and she told everybody, please don't, no food, and I'll just take off. And she called the minister, said, organize the ceremony. I mean, literally, this is what she did. So if we could do that, is there the next book, which could be the book so you don't need to be parented? Could you possibly, or maybe work backwards and reverse engineer this book or help us?
Well, I think there are many wonderful programs out about longevity, and they come down to some central principles, one of which, again, I'd like to offer you some delicious food, but certainly there's a lot of conversation about the food we eat, and the advantages of plant-based eating, sufficient protein and so forth. And there are people to go to specifically discover what our bodies need and what supplements, and there are many, many supplements now that age and longevity. So there's certainly good food. There is also good sleep. Anybody here have a problem sleeping through the night or whatever? This is a really important thing to try and get a handle on as much as you can. There are things to do and substances to take and things to avoid and times to eat and all of that. Another thing is social environments. This is very critical, that we stay active and involved with people we love. Exercise. On a personal note, I was able to reverse. I was going into osteoporosis. I was heading in that direction, osteopenia. And I didn't take any medication, but I did a lot of walking. And I went all the way the other way and got even better than what they want the number to be. So, it's very important. A lot of people like to have kind of a schedule. I don't think that's a requirement, but somehow getting up at the same time, doing some of the same things, clearing your head out, all that stuff are the kinds of things. And again, proper supplementation. There are longevity doctors. You've got a question?
Yeah, I wanted to know whether your parents had done any kind of advanced care plan.
Yes. Yes, my parents had long-term care, and I like that, and I got it, and the younger you get it, the cheaper it is. It's very hard to get, and it's getting fewer and fewer benefits. But it is one way if you're living independently or you don't know what's going to happen or how to have that certain amount of money set aside. People can come to your home or elsewhere.
But I meant actually more in terms of their goals and values, whether you had any kind of conversation with them regarding what is important to them, what is it they would be able to live with if they lost it. And I give an example of my mother-in-law who was terribly afraid of neurologic injury, anything to the brain or whether it was. She definitely did not want to be stuck with that and be ill with that. But she thought if she lost a limb, if she wound up in a wheelchair because she couldn't walk, that was okay. She was good with that. And as it turned out, she suffered a major brain bleed.
Sorry.
And was on life support, and it was easy for us to withdraw therapy because she had made that choice. She had made that decision already. And so, I'm sorry, when I talk about advanced care planning, of course, long-term care is really important, but I'm talking about as we begin to fail and get ill, what are our values? What is it that we feel we can live with or not live with? What's important to us? And I work as a professional patient advocate, and in my experience, it seems like people just don't expect to age, and they certainly don't expect to die, and so they don't talk about it, and they don't prepare for it.
I can't say I recall a lot of specific conversations with my parents about that. They lived to 92 and 95. And we talked more about money things. I think there was those concerns. I think I knew a certain amount about what they wanted. And when my mother lived with her Alzheimer's, there wasn't really much conversation. I remember she was being dragged up in a hospital to a surgical room, and I said, "It's my mother. What's she doing down there?" And the nurse said, "She said she had no family." So those sort of seem humorous now, but they were not at the time. And I think our generation is more likely to be able and conversant to have those conversations than the generation above us. Anybody, rest of you have had one of those? Or?
Can I just throw in there that my daughter, I wrote a poem last year which was Finding Wings to Fly, and it's my instruction statement. I said when I'm unwell and past my sell-by date, here's what I'd like you to do. And first we'll have a cup of Yorkshire Gold tea, honey for you, none for me, and then I want you to take me for an airplane ride. And basically it's when the moment is absolutely perfect, not a second before, open the door, push me out and watch me soar. So it's basically, I want to go skydiving. But she knows if failing that, maybe a pillow over my head or something, but we have a lot of conversations. And Michael, my husband over there, wants to be pushed out to Catalina on a surfboard. So we threaten every day that maybe it's time to push him out. Every day. Just about. Sorry, there's this particular question.
I have a quick question.
Please.
My daughter lives overseas. She was here last week, and I went up to see her in San Francisco. And I started having that, she's like 32, and I just started having that conversation with her. I was talking about power of attorney,
Right.
her name on my checking account and stuff like that. And she was very, very afraid.
Yes.
She was scared. She's like, she became very, very concerned about me in that instance. Like, are you sick or what?
Yes.
And I tried to be really honest with her, and I said something, I am the age I am, and your dad is, we're growing older, and we have to have these conversations, and I have to, I have to arrange things with someone in the family to start to be able to do certain things. And so then she's like, oh, okay, now I understand, but it was challenging, She was really afraid after that. So I don't really, she felt reassured.
There's a lot of delicacy.
Yeah.
And as we look at that conversation now, or anybody else who could benefit from your experience, maybe it would be helpful to start with, I'm not sick.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make your life easier. I want you to know some things about me that you may or may not know, some things about my thoughts and my wishes, and I hope we're available in our relationship to do that. Maybe it's especially important because you're far away and couldn't just, drive down the block and help me.
Yeah.
But
I just kind of threw it on her. She was like, whoa, what's going on? Are you sick? Why are we talking about
and one can imagine she would,
Jennifer. We're so grateful to be here. You would wanted to be part of this conversation or to listen. Do you have issues with or challenges?
Not anymore. My
No.
parents my mom died and my father is in assisted living. But if my mom hadn't died when she did, and my parents were very private, and they,
Yeah.
and independent. They didn't want to be taken care of, and my dad didn't even want my mom taking care of him. So she was like, anyway, it was a lot. But then she died, and then he couldn't stay alone, so we could intervene and put him in assisted living, and now he's fine. Thank goodness he had the money for it. It's so
That's the
expensive.
money, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, we're looking for solutions here again and not taking over. So, one of the things I talk about is car keys. Here we are in LA. And so people are driving around and maybe they are not as attentive as they could be or whatever. I suggest to people who are really hesitant to do anything about that in California, doctors can do that. So you don't have to be in the middle of that conversation. You can just suggest to the doctor that they do whatever they need to do. And if someone is not capable of driving, and that's true in a number of other states. But the idea here is not about taking things away. And so if the car keys have to be taken away by you or a physician, and I do say to people, can you imagine what it would be like if your mother hit somebody or hurt herself? How you would feel because you were too hesitant to take up something like that. But the solutions involve perhaps going to the market with your parents. And where is it that your mom drives to? Drives to the market, to the doctor, see some friends, or to a senior citizen place. Those are all things that you could get involved with. And while you're marketing with her, perhaps get some healthier food, lug the groceries in, make a fun time of it. You know, I know some older people who just love going to the market. I, for one, haven't been there since March 13th, 2020. So, what we want here is to see how we can kind of get them involved. And even with your daughter, you know, sort of ask her, perhaps, have you thought about this at all? No?
The money thing is a tricky one. I have a friend who's spending $12,000, a friend, a month on her parents. And it means that she can't do an awful lot of other things that she was hoping to do. So and I guess that's part of the advanced planning in some way.
Medical. Medical.
Medi-Cal. Yeah, but then you have to be completely.
Not anymore.
Oh, really? Interesting. Do you want to talk about that?
Jane can.
Well, there's been some change in the Medi-Cal law, and you don't necessarily need to what they used to call spend down to make your parents impoverished. In my day we did, but that's no longer necessary. So there are solutions, and some people in my generation are thinking of communal opportunities. Andy and I both lived in communes in our lifetime, and communes can often be multi-generational, so that there are perhaps college students who might, you know, help do the marketing and whatever and learn some stuff from us and so forth.
I love that idea. I want to start the Sundowner Club. I think that would be so much fun, and make it really fun. That's a phrase in Kenya for drinks at sunset. You know, you have your gin and tonic and with your pals. So you know, we can get started. Anybody here wants to join the Sundowner Club? We're a lot of fun. Anybody else?
I have a question for you. Do you give bondage discounts on your books? Because I need 12. I'm reading for my children, and I also need it for my grandchildren. Because I rely on them more than my children.
That's what my patients would say.
Good job.
That generation.
Yeah, it's an important one.
So they'll read the books for children. You know.
So as you point out, I don't know your name.
My name is Cola,
Oh,
like Coca-Cola.
Cola. Nice. You know, they're probably thinking about it too. And they probably don't know how to approach it with us. And sometimes we can make that easier.
do the opposite. They're like, we're dying. They're 50. My parents are in their 50 and they're threatening me every day like, we're dying right now. You need to go home. How should I respond to that?
Where is home?
I'm sorry?
Where is home?
Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City.
I think it's bigger here. I've been to Ho Chi Minh City.
Are they here or are they in Vietnam?
They don't like it here.
Tricky.
Yeah, well, that's its own.
That's another problem.
Do you know what it is that might help them like it more here?
Probably the idea of community.
I was just thinking, do they have a community? There are many Vietnamese, of course, in the Los Angeles area, but they may or may not know them, like them. Just because we came from the same country doesn't mean we like people necessarily.
Or they might want to go home. You know, they may want to go back to Vietnam, and that could be really hard, but that may be their choice too. That's hard for you.
The promised sirens.
Well, I don't know, maybe they're threatened to die, well, not to die, sorry. Maybe they're saying that so I would fly back home.
Live with them there?
Live with them, maybe. I don't know. I got it's very confusing. I don't know their intention one day. Like, I don't know how to communicate with them and have the conversation about when they finally age and like, what should I do? What is the expectation?
So when they tell you that they're dying, can you get into any of the details? Are you not well? Should we get a doctor? Are you just tired? And see if you can begin to elicit some answers that make sense to you as well as to them.
Well, so the tricky thing is, they live in Vietnam and I live here, and what I can offer is, why don't you guys come over here and then we get your insurance and I get you to go to a checkup and we'll see how it goes. And so now let's go back to the confusing part, because then they're like, oh, but we don't want to stay in the States for too long. And I'm like, oh, what do you want me to do? I'm sorry. So yeah.
No need to apologize.
I'm just very confused about, like, I tried to get a solution, but I don't know how to make them feel like, oh, it's gonna be okay. You're not actually dying.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger sister.
Can the two of you help together? Maybe to sit down with your parents and find out what's really going on.
I'll try that. Oh no, she's here. She's in San Diego.
That's close to Vienna.
Yeah, way closer.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah.
Well, I like the idea you had about the sequel to the book, because Jane, your book is really terrific. As someone who I said, you know, I used it a lot with respect to my own parents who were not prepared for that part of life, and it has become a very big burden on me and my siblings, because they weren't prepared financially, in terms of what their wishes were, what you were talking about, and kind of in denial that things might happen to them and they need to be taken care of. And I was thinking about your experience with your mother, Paula, what you're doing. I mean, it's kind of the kindest thing one can do for their, as a parent, for their kids. I'm realizing this now with respect to my own kids. The kindest thing I can do is prepare so that I'm not a burden on them. And so I would love to see that sequel written for the parents who want to do whatever it takes to reduce the amount of parenting their own children have to do for them. Like you.
That's
Yes,
me.
yes, I think
That's my real concern
yes,
right
that's the
now.
kind of thing you
They
can do,
come
I
to
think.
Paris, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to come to Paris and live with you,
Yeah.
you know, I want to go
Yeah.
live in Mexico,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but that's a big concern. I don't want to be a burden, but I don't know how not to be a burden, because number one, I don't have all the finances set aside, you know, I don't own a home, you know, I'm kind of like a home you want right now, just going from place to place. So,
The commune idea is a good one
okay.
for you too. You can join our Sundowner Club.
Oh, yeah, for sure, plan on it.
Or create your own, start
Yeah,
looking for
see
people.
what that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another reason she's like really afraid, because in the past 2 years, I haven't had any place to live. But I just go travel someplace and stay for a few months and come back for things I have to do here. So not only was I having brought up this conversation, I don't have the housing security, so it's just, I'm on housing list. But yeah, I just need to know what I can do myself to be more prepared myself and not be a burden. So I think, yeah, like you said, a sequel would be a really great.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
Great idea.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
As my editor. Well, I think a great deal of it is to take care of ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally. I think that most of us have a real hesitance to take on the fact that we are mortal, that we are all going to die, and that perhaps it's better to face it and see what our choices might be like than to push it away. So that's one of my suggestions, is that we begin to discover what we want, even if we're quite young, and how that might inform how we'd like to live our lives.
Hi, I have a question as a grandchild to parents or grandparents that have Alzheimer's. I do what I can to support my mom. She's read lots of books. She's read lots of books about caring for aging parents. And she has 2 siblings, but for some reason she just kind of shoulders a lot of the workload, the organizational labor, the scheduling of nurses, visiting them, and everybody, my aunts and uncles all live, they're all back in South Dakota, but they all live very close. I'm the only one that's far. So my aunt, my uncle, my mom all live close to my grandparents, and I just, of course I only get her side of the story, but I know she's very frustrated with her own siblings and their lack of contribution to the care and the emotional labor that is involved with my grandparents. So I guess I was just curious if you have any advice for a grandchild that's, wanting to be a support. I can't be there in person, but are there things that, I can do to keep her with a positive attitude and more full of love and less resentment, whether, any strategies you recommend for a grandchild?
Well, one of the things, as I said, we didn't have in my day was a phone, and I think regular contact is, I see people shaking their heads over there. I think regular contact, whether it's with a child off at college or an elderly grandparent, it's Tuesday at your lunchtime from your job. You spend 15 minutes on the phone with your grandmother, tell her what you're doing, ask what she's doing, just keep involved. And it's remarkable, a little memory. Oh, Grandma, weren't you going to go to that show with your friends on Saturday? How was it? It just really keeps people feeling vital. So that's one of the things you can do. And you also can ask your mom, In my experience, many of the original family issues kind of play out again later in life. So perhaps you were the responsible daughter growing up, and here you are again with that. And not a fan of holding on to resentment and regret, because they're all about the past. So the extent to which we can just be as present as we can and keep talking, and maybe sometimes, no matter which side of this equation you're on, it would be okay sometime for you to start a conversation. And you can use this meeting as an excuse. I went to this horrible talk the other day.
But this horrible talk is almost over. Are there any final questions that you might have before we close?
Food on the table.
Pardon me?
Food on the table.
Food on the table. Oh my God, there's so much cheese. Everybody has, while you're buying your books. You could, yeah, and thank you, Jennifer, so much for letting us come by.
This is a wonderful bookstore. It's very unique in the sense that it's a community related bookstore. You see people of all generations sitting here, having breakfast, catching up with friends. Cooper said she tried to be here, but she couldn't get a table.
Congratulations, it's been a labor of love. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what you're up to here?
Please share a little bit about your Village Well.
Yeah, well, so we opened Village Well 3 years ago with the vision that you described, really, to just be a gathering place for community and, you know, a place for people to browse books physically, but also to spend some time during their day. We consider ourselves a third place in between food and home and work, and we're your third place where you can feel welcome and just come and be with us. Cola's here a lot of days, just working, making her art, you know, sitting at the table, drinking her coffee and making her art. And I love just seeing people come together. And so we've been open 3 years. Some days, a lot of the time, people can't find a seat. We're just so crowded, and we don't have enough workspace. We don't have enough space for our books. So we're getting the opportunity to expand. And the office next door is going to be ours on May 1st. And we're going to do construction, and we'll have the twice as big space.
Wow.
We have events. We won't have to displace the people who are working. We'll have an event space that's, you know, separate. People won't have to just like. I noticed when you guys started talking, the people who were here to work, they got up, and a lot of them they're sitting in the kids section on these little stools on the ground with their laptops on their lap, and
awesome.
So there's really there was just really I don't know if there was a demand, but there was a need or a desire for this kind of a space.
How many hours a day do you work?
I try to just work 8 hours a day,
Rubbish.
6 days a week.
We know better.
Yeah.
Well, I know if you'll have a few final words, but I'm just so very grateful to be here.
Thank you so much for your kind words and for bringing this conversation here, because it's so interesting. Even though I'm not like in the hardest part of it anymore, it's just so fascinating. And like Cooper was saying, like or like Cola was saying, or you're like we're thinking about it now for like how are we going to behave? And I wonder like, didn't our parents like deal with their own parents and say to themselves, we're going to do it differently so our kids don't have this burden?
Yeah. Well,
you know,
our parents, you know, my oldest grandmother was 78 when she died, which is pretty close to where some of us are now.
Very young.
And she was the only living one. So I think they didn't quite have the lifespan. And I think also things were different. You know, the communities and Vietnamese community has its own cultural standards and values, and people from each. My grandparents came over from Europe, and so they had all of that stuff. But I think it's really important to try and figure out how to have this part of our lives and those we love be a journey of love. And so that's what the offering is here, is spend some time with yourself, your older relatives, especially those of you in the back, and see how you can make it just a really fulfilling experience, and maybe even parent better than your own parents do.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.